What's good? What's good? What's good, everybody? Happy Saturday. Thank you for tapping into the Cops and Convicts podcast with Sean Shepard. I am Sean Shepard. Please like, share, subscribe, follow. We are live on TikTok, LinkedIn, the YouTube Cops and Convicts channel, and Facebook. And my guest today is joining us. Her name is Brittany Wilson-Guillermo.
That was a good job. Thank you.
Welcome to the podcast, Brittany. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm recovering from eating.
Aren't we all?
We've already talked. I know your Thanksgiving was good. You didn't have as many dishes to eat as I did, but it's okay.
Yep.
It means your recovery is less dramatic than mine. I'm still dealing with this cigar I smoked last night.
It's too bad.
Not good.
Your mouth is like
my mouth is better.
Granddad.
My mouth's better than last night. My mouth is better. I'm just worn down, you know.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for joining me today to talk about a topic that is like central in your life, and it's cursory in mine because, as I've told you recently, I keep stumbling across people who have ADHD, but you're the closest person in my life that has ADHD. And before we jump into it, I want to read what the definition of ADHD is and some of the symptoms and whatnot. And I'm taking this from the National Institute of Mental Health.
Okay.
And ADHD is short for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And it's a developmental disorder marked by persistent symptoms of inattention, which I don't get with you. You pay plenty of attention, and or hyperactivity and impulsivity that interfere with functioning or development. Symptoms begin in childhood and can affect daily life, including social relationships and school or work performance. ADHD is well known among children and teens, but many adults also have the disorder. And some of the ADHD experience an ongoing pattern of inattention, having problems staying on task, paying attention, or being organized, which are not due to defiance or lack of comprehension. Hyperactivity, being extremely restless or constantly moving, including in situations when it's not appropriate, excessively fidgeting or tapping or talking too much. Impulsivity, acting without thinking, interrupting others, or having difficulty with self-control. Impulsivity can also involve a desire for immediate rewards, which, if that's the case, like all of America has ADHD, if it's about immediate rewards, or inability to delay gratification or consider long-term consequences. It's saying here that it's mostly genetic. So if you have it, chances are like you were preordained to have it, which is really unfortunate. But we can talk about some other stuff. The first thing I want to talk with you about is when were you diagnosed with ADHD?
I was actually really blessed to have the supportive family and resources that I did. So I actually got diagnosed really early. I want to say maybe as early as like between the ages of 8 and 10.
Damn.
When I got that, yeah.
So between the ages of 8 and 10, so you've known, well, at least your parents have known. I don't know if they told you at age 8 that you have ADHD, but
oh yeah, I had to get assessed, so they had to tell me like why I was doing extra tests and stuff, and I always had tutors all throughout my schooling.
So well over 20 years at least, you've known that you have ADHD. Mm-hmm. Do you remember what your parents told you as it relates to why they had you tested? Like, what was going on with you where they were like, this child is interesting?
There's a couple of things. For one, I really struggled with reading and writing. Like it was like moving mountains trying to have me write a sentence down. And I used to read as if every word had a period after it. I just really struggled to like follow the words on a page. And anytime we would be tasked in grade school to like set time for reading or writing, my head would be like this, and I would just be like looking out the window or just doing anything else but what I was supposed to be doing, to the point that it was hindering my progress. There was even a time when they almost considered keeping me back a grade because that's how much I struggled with reading. But my parents just really, especially around like third grade, they really hunkered me down, and I had to go to a camp that focused on like reading and writing as well as playtime. But that saved me from being kept back. But I needed tutoring like the entire time, basically. And then I finally started to get the hang of things by high school, but I still needed tutoring. And just the combination of the time management and trying to focus, school was always an uphill battle for me.
So talk to me more about the writing. How is writing difficult for you? I could understand reading completely. Talk to me about writing.
I just preferred to like work with my hands and to be physical. So I love to play. I love to run outside. I love to play sports. I love to create things, make things. Even in school, there were times when my teacher would be talking and I would be creating something with paper clips and rubber bands. And I remember her saying, are you going to pay attention, Brittany, if you keep that on the desk? And I was like, yes. And it actually did help me pay more attention to listening to her when I could keep my hands busy. So having all that energy, especially if the topic didn't interest me, trying to express that on paper, I had a hard time just quieting myself enough to focus. I had to literally learn how to associate, for example, essay writing, the structure of it, with Legos. Once I realized constructing an argument in essay format was like building blocks of Legos, once that really clicked, I really got the hang of writing, and I needed less and less help from others and my parents. But again, that wasn't until well into high school when that really started to flow for me.
Do you recall what your teacher said to your parents to get them to? Oh no, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Did your parents notice there was something going on with you first, or was that something that was identified in school?
I think it was both, because like I was also just super hyperactive and just all over the place as a kid.
Not much has changed.
I think I've done much better than but yeah, so the teachers would be like, Brittany's having a hard time focusing, like we got to band together. So it was a group effort to get me to get through school, for sure.
And what were your relationships like with other kids?
Oh, I was like the class clown, and I loved that. I ate that up because I got to be, again, physical and jumpy, and people thought that was funny, and I drank that up.
You were reminding me of someone that I've known since childhood. When you said class clown jumping around, I immediately went to this one individual who I'm not going to name. If any of my friends are watching that we grew up with, you know exactly who I'm talking about. You have to know who I'm talking about. And it's all coming into focus for me now, 50 years later. What was wrong with this fool? That perhaps he wasn't diagnosed. I don't think that he was diagnosed, but he could not sit still,
Mm-hmm.
could not sit still, and needed attention and created attention. I don't know if he had any issues with reading or writing. I don't recall that. He was just a hyper person.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but it just seems like ADHD might be more prevalent than people want to admit to.
Well, everybody is starting to want it now, because if you try to get assessed, at least where I live, you try to get assessed, there's months waiting period before you can even get somebody to test you, as an adult at least. So
This journey that we're talking about right now is grade school. How did things progress for you in high school?
I still struggled with the time management thing. And there was even a point where it was a question whether I should take a language just so I could keep up with the schoolwork. But I hung in there and just grit my teeth, and really, again, tutoring helped me get through. I often needed, so once I got diagnosed, part of the regiment for that for me was getting extra time. So I would get extra time on assignments, extra time when taking tests. So often I would be handing my work in at different times than my classmates. And then when we would take tests together, I was almost always the last one in the room.
Did that make you feel uncomfortable?
To a degree, because yes and no. I think in some ways it was sort of my normal, and it wasn't necessarily something, at least kids didn't make fun of to my face. So it was more just an internal disappointment in myself. Like, even though I knew I needed it and I was grateful to have it, it would still feel kind of, yeah, a little bit like, Sam, like I tried to study the best I could. I'm trying to, get through this. And I look to my left and my right, and it's just me in the room. But I had to do what I had to do. I mean, I would prefer that than not have that extra time to properly fill out the test. So, you just take what you're given and work with it. So I was grateful to have that. Because even with the extra time, I would find myself not always being able to finish tests. I was never a good test taker either.
Me neither. Maybe for different reasons, but I'm just fascinated with the diagnosis when you're in grade school. Now you're in high school, and there are things that are in place to allow you to fit in as best you could from a time management standpoint when it comes to tests. And do you feel like when you were in high school, as you were getting older, that you were able to focus a little bit better, or were there some techniques that you had to use while you were in class or while you were trying to study?
Yes and no. I would say yes, that there were some certain techniques. Part of the tasks I was to do was schedule out my day down to the minute, even my breaks, how long my breaks would be, so that I could be more efficient with studying. I had to always carry around a calendar with me, extensive note taking. Like, everyone's supposed to take notes, yes, but I had to do that to just help me pay attention. And then also I would often forget things if I didn't write them down. So I had to constantly be writing. They also Color coordinating is also a tool they have us use to help with remembering things. So sometimes I'd highlight things different colors, or having different colored binders for things. And again, some of this other kids do normally, but I needed it all the time just to be average, on paper.
But
That's the difference.
aren't those techniques just some like one more thing that you had to have in your brain that was already overwhelmed with so much? Whether it was colors and the calendar,
Mm.
it just seems like trying to deal with ADHD creates more clutter almost.
Well, part of our brains aren't wired the same as what they call neurotypical brains. So the way certain doctors would describe it is as if the thoughts in our brains are cluttered and are not necessarily organized. I like to more look at it as we just have an alternate way of thinking. So it's going to be in a different place. So in certain spaces that's beneficial, and in others you have to adapt more in order to fit in with what's going on in your environment. So yes, in the case of schooling, when you're being taught a certain way, I have to do extra steps to keep up with the class, or try to keep up with the class.
It sounds like a deeper dive than being dyslexic.
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to do the what they call the oppression Olympics, or the
No,
I'm not dyslexic, so I can't compare, but
I'm just saying I've had a dyslexic friend, and the backwardness of it all, and once you're able to solve that, it seemed like I was able to move on with life. And it's with you, this is obviously ongoing, which is why I wanted to talk to you about what it's like to have ADHD and navigate your way through this world professionally and personally. So, when you're in college and you have ADHD and you have the school load that you have, and you're fostering social relationships with people, what's the most difficult part about social relationships as it relates to having ADHD when you're around people that don't know that you have it?
oh man. Well, just to quickly touch back on the dyslexic point,
Mhm.
um, I'm not fully aware whether dyslexia affects behavioral aspects of the brain. I have read some things on how socially it made people feel uncomfortable, and if they didn't get the right resources, it hindered their ability to get through school and all that. But
Right.
I will say it may be apples and oranges in that dyslexia is mostly a visual aspect, whereas ADHD is a chemical and it impacts more of your behavior. It's not just a visual thing. So how it will impact you, that we may share some aspects of what is a hindrance, but I would say there may also be a lot of differences in terms
Yeah.
of internally how it's impacting us. But shifting back to your current question, yeah, how it impacts like my relationships, or it can be a lot. And again, I just learned some of this recently too, even though I've had this for a while. I just read a study more recently that really broke down what's going on in the brain and how it impacts different elements of your personality, how you communicate, how you see, how you perceive information. And so me being able to answer this more thoroughly is even news to me. So I tend to I like to describe myself as being sociable, gregarious, and the like. Um,
Really?
I enjoy people. I love like learning about them. And so when I first meet someone, yeah, we can talk about the weather, but I really want to know like who you are and your inner workings and your what moves your spirit. So often I'll forget that I've ran into this a few times where, and it's not in malice, it's not always conscious that I've done this to you until we have an awkward moment. But sometimes I'll ask what others may feel are very invasive or deep questions that maybe they haven't had time to process, let alone want to share with others. But to me, that's like a normal thing because I'm constantly having that conversation with myself and my immediate friends. So I'll ask things and people will be like, what is going on with this girl? Or I'll
Like
get
when you first meet them, you'll ask a question.
in certain settings, yeah. And I don't realize that it's invasive again, because to me it's like hey, how you doing? What's moving you? What's shaking? Or, how's your spirit? How's your
I
life?
need you to give me an example of a question that you've asked someone when they were like, "Yo," give me an example.
Geez, that's so I'm trying to think of like a quick one.
You told me a story of some dude that you went out with once, and you asked him something that made him cry.
Oh yeah, that was actually kind of recent.
Okay, I don't remember what you asked him, but let's go over that. What did you ask him that made him cry? And you just met this dude.
Yeah, literally just met him. And I was hanging out with him and his cousin, and we decided to go continue to have drinks and just hang out. And this is late in the night, but we're having, genuine, cool conversation. And at some point, he shares that he's a father. So, I was like, well, what's it like being a father, especially in this climate? And mind you, this is a brother. So I'm asking him, not just from a man, but as a Black man, especially going on right now. And he just like had this interesting pause and then just started to break down. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, but wait. I don't see anything wrong with that question. The fact that he broke down, started crying, that sounds like a him thing. That you got to come up with a better question than that, because that question is really, really benign to me.
But but that's just the thing. So perfect example, right? Maybe to you that seemed benign, but sometimes I'll ask people things about their soul or their spirit, or like what really brings you joy, or I'm like really trying to know someone, and if they're not like okay or happy or had even thought about it, it can really throw them off. I'll give you another example. There was a lady that she was like a mutual friend, and I was trying to figure out if she would be someone who'd be my friend, and we were kind of back and forth, but never really were able to hang out until much later. And we finally link up, and she starts talking to me about like this guy she's entertaining and how they've been on and off and this and that. And I was like, well, why are you even dealing with him if he's giving you mixed signals and you're not feeling fulfilled? And I was like, that's weird. And she and she was like, dang, Britt, like I'm not trying to go to therapy right now. I'm just trying to like have some fun. And like it became really awkward. And I just couldn't understand like why she would continue to entertain that. And she felt like I was too serious, or she didn't want to like do all of that mental gymnastics. She just wanted to be in the fluff of like, yeah, girl, like, yes, right, keep playing ghost, don't text them. She wanted me to do that with her, and it just didn't register for me. Needless to say, we never spoke again. But that's like a little sliver of an example. Like sometimes it may come off as me being super blunt, or I may not fully like read it because I'm thinking of it from like a logistical, or I'm like, this math is not computing for me. And I realize that happens a lot with a lot of ADHD people. So the small talk and the whole fluff, very surface level conversation, we tend to not do as well with that, because for one, it's not interesting. So we start to space out. And I realized in hindsight, a lot of my interactions with people, especially when it felt awkward, I was like, oh, I was like asking too much from them, or we just weren't compatible in that way.
It's to me, it seems like you want to have conversations that are stimulating.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I wish more people wanted to have conversations that are stimulating. And I just feel like so far, based on what you've described to me, that the questions that you've asked are simply reflective of somebody who's present on a deeper level. And I get it. A lot of people want to go out and have drinks to escape whatever it is that you might want to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Like you ask somebody how they're doing, they might break out into tears.
Yeah.
And that's not there's nothing wrong with you asking that question, but in certain environments, and you catch somebody at the wrong moment, you ask them how they're doing, like, how's your family? I don't know. To me, it sounds like it's difficult for a person who doesn't have ADHD, who may have been made to feel uncomfortable by a question that you asked. It'd be very difficult for them to be like, maybe she has ADHD. You know what I'm saying?
If they know about it, they may be able to point it out. But if they don't know, I think sometimes it's misread as me being, again, invasive or missing a certain social cue, or which translates to being weird or ill or like turned off, or just too much. Sometimes being read as too much.
It doesn't sound like you ask inappropriate questions, and you haven't shared that you make.
Oh, I have before. It's just
okay. I'm asking you to tell me what one of those.
I don't know how appropriate it is for this setting, though.
I think it's appropriate.
I should have probably asked permission from my friends before telling the story, so I don't know if I should share it.
Well, I mean, you don't have to say any names.
Okay.
I'll never ask you for names. I just want to. I want to get an example of an inappropriate question or an inappropriate statement.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to preface this by, to the friends who know what this is about, I pray that you forgive me, and I will make sure to not name any names or give any specific details. But part of, and again, how much of it is ADHD, how much of it is me, it's still kind of an intricate web that I'm also learning. But I think part of me wanting the deep questions and all of that, I have what some may describe as brash humor, especially the more you get to know me, the more like my humor can be very raw, not always the most PC. And so in certain work settings and all that, I try my hardest to hold it in. And it may slip out every now and again, but I try my best to hold it in. But in a fun setting, I'm very like free, very me. And sometimes the things I say, I don't realize in the moment how shocking they can be. I just think it's funny or just like fun, lighthearted. So I'm hanging out with a really close friend of mine, and she says she's with her two friends, and we're about to go out to some like comedy show or something like that. So we all hop in the car, and this is my first time meeting them, but I can't believe I'm saying this. But they're in the back seat, and for the friend who knows me, she knows that I meant no malice. Like, it was really just me being my silly self. But there were these two ladies in the back, and I can't tell you fully why I said this, but I was turning out, like, I said, "Hey, y'all, how you doing? So what's up?" And then I was like, "Are y'all effing?" But I was just joking because I didn't know what their relationship was. So I was just trying to like get to know them. And to me, it was just like a funny way to ask, like, who are you guys? Who are you to each other? I didn't know they were cousins. I was just being myself and being
Was this
silly.
in LA? Was this in LA?
Sure. We'll say it's in LA.
Okay. I would have just dismissed you as like this crazy girl.
And that's fine. Many have. They may not be completely wrong. But to me, it was just funny. Like, I was just instead of just being like, "Hi, how are you?" But I was just trying to get to know them. And in that moment, I thought that was a funny way to ask that.
Did you actually wonder if they were?
Not really.
Slightly.
I just genuinely didn't know them. I was just getting to know them, and because I thought they were like close friends with my friend, I guess subconsciously I thought they would understand me in some way or get my humor, even though that was a silly thought. And so as the night progressed, they kept saying like, "Oh, we're so tired," and this and that. And I thought their energy was funny, but they kept interacting with us and me, and so that was fine. And I find out later that they were actually livid that I had asked them that. And I was like, why?
Yeah, I'm wondering why too.
Because like maybe, yeah, it was awkward, but why are they mad? And my friend was like, they told me that they had a threesome with somebody and they thought I told you. And so when you asked them that, they got really pissed and they thought that they had told me and I was being like, and I was like, I have no idea what any of that is. I just was trying to have a good time. But to this day, they hate me. And I know now that that energy I felt from them was them like bubbling up inside
The first thing that went through my mind when you told me that they were mad, that they were livid that you asked the question, was the question that you asked had too much truth to it.
But again, I had no clue. I didn't know these people from Adam.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
But I've had former players of mine think that I was gay.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found out they thought that, I just shrugged my shoulders and thought it was funny, right? Mm-hmm. The only way I would get upset is if I was and didn't want anybody to know, right? And like, how'd you find out type of thing. Mm-hmm. So I've told you, I put myself in other people's shoes. When you're telling stories, I'm putting myself in places. I'm putting myself in your shoes, and I'm putting myself in the girls in the back seat, right? And if it was two dudes in the back seat and you said that, and I was one of those dudes, I would be like, this girl is bugging, right? Right? There's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with this girl. Like, her sense of humor. She's a crazy California person. I wouldn't get mad that you asked that question unless
I can't. But what the point of that story is, those kind of moments happen to me a lot. And then, and the point of that is a lot of people with ADHD, we struggle with filtration, like filtering our speech, because we're more likely to be impulsive based on how our brain is wired and all of that, and the focus and all of that. So we tend to have more outbursts, and that means we're not as great at filtering our tongue. And that's definitely been a thing for me. Definitely been. Ask any of my friends, like, yeah.
I don't listen. I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's just reminding me, and I'm not gonna say where, but during this time that these players of mine thought I might have been gay is because I was spending time with a guy who was a bit effeminate. And so when I got feedback that they thought this, I'm like, oh, well, let me ask him if he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it in an email.
That's interesting, but okay.
He exploded at me.
Why an email? Why not a phone call or in person?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. I guess it was like, I guess it was a bit impulsive. Like I wanted an answer now. I don't remember why I did that, but the response I got was so over the top angry. I was like, all right, that could have been a simple no. Why would you ask that? But it was like, I was like, oh, and I never asked the question again, but it just made me think, okay, this has been a topic for him at some point, and he's upset about it. Whatever. But anyway, I find that to be a little bit familiar to me, although I'm not hearing from you that you make inappropriate statements.
I mean, if that wasn't an example of one, I definitely have had plenty of, especially growing up. Like my parents did a great job rearing me and pulling me aside or pulling my coattail and being like, rein it in. Because I always had trouble controlling my volume. I used to be very loud, and they used to have to be like, indoor voice, bring it in, So, and again, it was lacking of awareness of how I'm coming off to others, how wild I'm being. So it just continues. I'm working at it. I'm trying to refine myself, but it still comes up like in interesting ways as I mature, as I get older. And so even spilling over into the workplace, right? I've been in corporate.
We're gonna get there.
Okay.
We're definitely gonna get there. But one of the things that, since you've told me that you have ADHD, I've associated your ADHD with grown friends that I have that have Asperger's, full-on autism.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched them say things that have made people, like, I've been in the space and he said some things, not malicious, but people have been like, I'm not going to be friends with him anymore. He's weird.
Well, they're definitely our cousins when it comes to, neurodivergence.
Tell me what you've said. You've explained this to me before, but tell me what makes ADHD and autism cousins of one another and why they're separate, but there's overlap.
Certainly and how it impacts our brains in certain elements, like again, tying to like how our brains are wired differently. And so how we perceive information, what is interesting or stimulating, what can be overwhelming or overstimulating, I think we share in some elements, but in terms of, there definitely still are some differences, but they're like, we're like branches in an umbrella, if you will.
Okay. Yeah. So,
and I don't know like every single detail of why. I've just read how we are under this similar umbrella.
well, you've actually helped me to identify some things I've shared with you with people that I've met. We could talk about that in a little bit, but I do want to talk about how having ADHD has affected you professionally in your career. So tell our viewers what you do career wise.
Okay. I'm trained by, the degree aspect. I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm also an automotive technician, and I've done both throughout. I've also worked in other industries, mainly tied to engineering. But those are my two main things. And so that's a very unique industry to be in, being myself. But in general, I would say just spanning corporate world in general is a very specific way the office is run, and how managers like things to be. And so we're starting to see, I think, a shift in how the office is ran as younger generations are coming in and becoming managers. But I definitely still had sort of in the realm, I was usually one of the youngest in the room. I'm usually the only one that looks like me in the room. So how they run things is what people would call old school. So one of the things that I continue to have to work on is my time management and my punctuality. That's something that I struggle with, and I need to continue to work on. And so that would come up with my different positions. But it wasn't just whether I showed up at a certain time or not. They would also, there's this through line of them having a problem with my pace of work. And sometimes it would even be when I would clock out for lunch. I would get into some managers about that, depending on how they want to run their office. And so when you have ADHD, yes, it's attention or hyperactive, or there's the hyperactivity in the word, right? But I think that often is misleading to people who don't understand it. Like, yes, there are many who can be hyperactive. I certainly was, especially as a kid. But it's not just about that. There's like the other side of that coin. So when we are interested in something and we do want to like learn more about a subject, we can dive in so deeply into something, we have a hard time regulating our time again, but it's like the opposite. So how that manifests in me is that when I'm doing something I'm truly interested in, I do not want to break away from it. Even if somebody needs me to like pull me aside to do something else, even if I need a drink of water and it's out of my reach, I get agitated that I have to get up and leave what I'm doing to drink water or go to the bathroom. Like, I'll get angry because I'm so deeply invested in what I'm doing. I do not want to break away until I feel like I've reached a point where I can tie it up in a bow and I'm at a good place. Now let me break away. So how that would look in the workplace is for example, a certain manager would say, I want everyone to clock out at lunch at 11:55. I want you back at your desk by 12:45. I didn't do well with that because sometimes I didn't even get fully focused, or even if I was focused, if I'm deeply in a problem and I'm trying to find a solution, I want to keep going. I just want to keep going. And so often it would be 2, 3 o'clock. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm in a cool place. Let me go get some lunch. And then I'd go get some lunch and I'd come back and the manager would be like, where have you been? And I'm like, I went to go get lunch. Like, what is the problem? And he's like, I couldn't find you. I need you to be at your desk when I say so. And those kinds of environments don't work well for me because it takes so much effort to get myself focused that when I am in it, I just want to ride that wave. I don't want to break from it because I know how hard it can be to get back into that groove. And I work better when I have the flexibility to work with those waves. But this is where like medication would come into play and help with those ebbs and flows so that your focus can be more streamlined. I haven't felt as comfortable taking medication. And so I tried to just power through. And I've struggled more because of it, because I'm still trying to find the right natural remedies to be the most optimal. So it's just a tough period. It's been a tough period for me because of that. And now it's different because now I have bills and rent and all of this. And it hurts when I have to abruptly leave because I got fired or, I had to quit or this, or, you know what I'm saying? So
you're saying that ADHD has cost you career positions?
Absolutely. I've had to restart multiple times, which financially has put me in more of a vulnerable position than I could have potentially been right now. And
so the quality of your work is not the issue. It's the pace of your work.
Yeah, usually that's the case. Yep. To the point where there was a certain employer, I was having a spirited debate with them about my quality. And I'm like, you guys are rushing me. You keep rushing me. I'm telling you, first of all, the group I'm in is not conducive to my best abilities. But also, I have one of the lowest, repair rates in the shop. But yet and still, I keep being in the red zone. I keep getting written up. Why is this not valued? And my supervisor straight up told me, you know what, Brittany, you're not wrong. We see that your quality is good. We know you take pride in your work, but that's not how things run here. It's about how fast are you? Do exactly what you see on the page and nothing else. And I would be like, but how I want to, so this was in relationship to certain machinery. I don't want to give too much away, but it was involved with certain machinery. And so I was like, I always think about, would I let my parents use this? Is it safe enough for a family member to use? That's how I would think when I would tend to the machinery. And they were like, yeah, that's cool. You need to be faster. Do less. If you want to stay employed here, do less. And I was like, I don't know what to say to that.
So you're doing quality work, and the work that you do has a low rate of winding up coming back because it wasn't done right. Mm-hmm. And you're telling me that your employer didn't care about the quality of doing it done right the first time. They just wanted it done quickly. And if it came back because there was some fault of your work because you did it quickly, that was acceptable. That was more acceptable.
It was we would get to that bridge if we crossed it. But these are the certain metrics we need you to meet. And in this department, you're not pushing them out the way we want. So you're on thin ice. And I pretty much, the entire time I was there, it was like I was on the verge of being fired the entire time.
How many jobs do you think that you've lost because of ADHD?
I would say at least like 60% of my jobs, at least. But they didn't all end poorly. I did have some experiences in the corporate space where I did well. And I realize now, in hindsight, that was because it already had built into it the things I need to be more successful, which are a more flexible schedule, being able to be remote or can go into the office, having nuance and change in what I was doing. So sometimes I would go to a customer site. Sometimes I would do emergency work for the government. So I was getting flown not internationally, but throughout the nation. And so having that diversity in tasks and what I was doing, and again, the fluidity of when I could work really helped me. And I did well there. The reason why I ended up leaving that job was just because they got bought by another company. And so I just, instead of getting laid off, I was able to line something up and left. Because usually when there's an acquisition, they say, oh, everything's gonna be fine. The scissors are coming. They're gonna cut people. They're gonna cut departments. And I didn't want to stick around for that. But I enjoyed what I did at that job.
So my experience with you having ADHD typically has only kind of come up for me while we're talking on the phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can get going when we get interested.
We can get going, but you can get going in a way that is unique to having ADHD. And what I mean by that is, look, I'm guilty of talking a lot, and sometimes I'll start rambling, mostly when I feel like I'm tired, right? What I thought was rambling from you isn't rambling, because your thoughts are pretty coherent and really directed. It's just that you will get focused on what you're talking about. Obviously, it's a topic that's very interesting to you. Mm-hmm. And this has only happened when we're talking about work, because we have talked about you working, and you being an engineer, you'll latch on to something that is so unique and intricate to your job that there's no way I could possibly know anything about it. And you gone.
And it's fun too.
Right? And I would imagine that while you're talking about this thing, that it is like great for you. Like you're on cloud 9, lost in whatever you're talking about as it relates to engineering. And for a minute or so, I'm with you, and then I'm lost, and I don't have a moment to be like, hey, I'm over here. I'm still on this call with you. But what I'm saying to you is, you and I can laugh about it because I know you have ADHD.
Yes.
But if I didn't know you had ADHD, and I wasn't a patient person, and I was somebody who's self-absorbed, and it's like, she's always talking. She's always talking. She's always talking about, whatever. I can see some people who might quietly exit stage left and not want to talk to you as much. But it helps to understand the behavior. And so now when you are into something, I could be like, yo, short bus.
Yes.
and 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 for our viewers, that's your phrase, not mine.
Yeah.
But it's
Proud,
almost
a
like
proud member.
it's almost like our safe. And I don't say that often, but it's something I could say to snap you out of it and be like, "Yo, you're gone," and I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't want to figure out what you're talking about because this is way deep into an area I don't know anything about, and I think that it really helps our relationship because I understand your behavior,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't bother me. But for somebody who doesn't understand what's going on with you, and people, we're living in a society right now where people just are just like, swipe left, swipe right.
But also too, I was gonna say some people may know and they still don't like it, and that's fine, right? But I think it's mainly the people who don't know, and therefore we get mischaracterized as being stubborn or a contrarian or just being purposefully difficult, and then that in my past I would internalize that because it would be an attack on my character and I would feel wrongly accused of something that I knew that wasn't who I am. And again, I guess this is more specifically to like in the work setting, right? But at the same time, I would feel trapped because I didn't feel comfortable disclosing that information to them. So it'd be a lot of internal anguish that I would deal with because I'm dealing with somebody who just thinks I'm difficult, annoying, this, that, and this, that. And I'm literally trying my best to like do my best for you. And I can't even tell you fully why it's not working.
Does it make you feel closeted at all?
Yeah, you could describe it as a form of like how people feel when they're closeted. Yeah.
I can see that. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, no, I don't feel especially in my field of work. And I told you that the people that I tend to be working with, they're not as educated about it, nor do I think they care to learn. And so, yes, legally and on paper, you're supposed to have accommodations for people with disabilities and this and that, but that's not the reality. If they can hire somebody who doesn't have a neurological thing that needs an aid versus someone who's just going to blindly comply to everything you say you want without having for you to adjust it, they're going to pick the easier choice. But I have bills to pay and I want to build stuff. And so I have to make a decision. And so up until this point in my career, I would just not tell them and grit my teeth. And I thought I could just like power through. And that hasn't been working as well.
Is ADHD a formal disability that could be covered under the American Disabilities Act?
Yes. Because when you fill out like applications, which I have a lot of practice in, there's a section where they ask you whether you have a disability or not, and ADHD is listed in one of the examples.
Yeah, I'm. Ooh, I just Googled it. Yes, the ADA covers attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It protects against discrimination. So
yeah, but it's not real. I mean, it is, but it's not. When people don't know, again, I never felt comfortable to disclose that information. And so I recently have gone through what you could call a burnout because I kept running into the similar issues with like what we described earlier. And I had to have a hard reset with my own behaviors, what I need to take accountability in doing better at to change. And also really understanding the reality of having ADHD. So when I came across this study that my mother sent me, I cried when I read it because I had never read something so detailed that read me to the T, to the point that my struggles had footnotes. It was like jarring how much of me was on those pages. And in a way, it was validating to know that my struggles were real, and not me just being just solely just a disorganized mess, that there was like a reality to why. But it also empowered me to understand it's still my responsibility to learn how to adapt. It also made me realize, or have to redefine, what the term accommodations has meant to me. Because how you're treated with this, what they call disability, in an academic setting is very different than your reality in a corporate setting.
So talk to me about that. What things, I don't know how you're going to be able to process this pretty well, I guess, but because I'm sure you've thought about it.
Yeah, that's the thing we do.
What things can employers put into place that would make it more user-friendly for you to get your work done in a manner that is most user-friendly for you and most user-friendly for them?
That answer is multi-tiered because it depends on the tasks I'm doing. Some of the jobs I've had have been more physical, and those would be different answers in a way than a desk job. But I'll say for a desk job, being able to have access to the necessary files I need 24/7. And that's much easier to do now. We have cloud-based databases we can host our information on. Because sometimes I'll get this crazy deep dive focus at like 1:45 a.m. and I want to ride that wave. And I can get great work done when I have that wave. But if I'm not able to access the work, it's harder for me to capitalize on those moments. So I would say that. I would also say being able to be flexible. So if I'm required to physically clock in somewhere at a very specific time every single day until further notice, that becomes really difficult for me to maintain over a long-term period. I'm much better at being able to stay home sometimes, going somewhere else, being able to work alternative hours, different shifts. It just helps me be a better worker for you when I don't have somebody caring if I clocked in at 7:15 or whether I didn't. So that's something else that would help. That's been helpful for me. I'll say that. What else? Sometimes I need to ask the person who is assigning me tasks multiple questions. Sometimes I need to re-ask them because the way I interpret what you're asking may be different than how you conveyed it. And that's happened to me before where I wrote it down, I think I got it, and I do something and they're like, this is not what I asked for. So I need someone or I've worked best when there is like an open communication obviously respecting boundaries, right? Like not hitting them up at 12 in the morning, but them being open to re-explaining something if I need it. Because again, how we perceive information is not always going to be the same. So that those are the top 3 I can think of off the top of my head for like desk jobs.
When you think about the ADA, and for those watching, the American Disabilities Act, and you being quite sure that you've been fired as a result of you having ADHD, did they know you had ADHD, or you kept that concealed?
I kept that concealed pretty much the whole time. And in one instance, by the time I did tell the HR lady that I had it, it was way too late. I was already going to get fired, but I felt so defeated and I was so sad because I felt so unsupported that I felt I had to share that with her just so I could give her some context.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, wow. Oh, yeah. And she kind of got it, but it was still like, and again, it's too late. At that point, the damage was done. I was already having a lot of issues with pretty much everybody in the office.
Well, they were having issues with you. Well, no, you've told me it went 2 ways, because some people have been just flat out disrespectful.
Yeah, no. And again, I'm leaving out like the racism I experienced. You could add sexism in there. That's all mixed in too. I'm just trying to keep it on the ADHD part, but there were times when my punctuality was fine. I was getting the work in fine, and I was still getting disrespected. So there was definitely that as well. But
so really, when it comes to not just your work, but your personal life, you and I'm just being hypothetical. You and I have plans to, well, let's not do you and I. You have a date with somebody, and the plan is to meet up at some restaurant at 7:30. And you're consistently late doing those things. What makes you late?
So we have this thing called time blindness, where again, it's going back to the way our brain is wired, and therefore our reward system, how it's set up differently. We literally will lose track of time in our head. Like if we don't feel it the same. We could look at a clock, we could have alarms, all that, and still be at risk for being late. And so for me, it's that I'll be in my head about, okay, this is what I need to do to get ready. And then I'll like walk out in the kitchen and I'll be like, oh my God, I got to wash these dishes. And then I wash the dishes and I'm like, dang, what's that smell? Oh, it's the trash. Let me take the trash out. And then I'm like, oh, but wait, the recycling is kind of weird. Let me reorganize the recycling. And then I'm like, yo, I need to work out. Maybe I should work out first. So then I'm like, yeah, I can get a quick workout in. And then I'll work out. And then I'll like kind of space out in the middle of my workout, because that happens sometimes. I'll just space out in between sets. And then I get back into it. And I'm like, that was a great workout. And they'll be like, oh, shoot, I only have like 30 minutes. And I got to get in the shower. And then I get in the shower. And then I'm like, oh, wait, but what am I going to wear? I forgot to pick what I was going to wear. And then I'm like in my closet trying to figure out what I'm going to wear. And then I'm like, dang, did I finish the dishes or not? And then I'm like, okay, good. I did finish the dishes. But shoot, okay, what shoes am I going to wear? And I'm late.
And that has nothing to do with how you feel about this person that you're meeting. Like you could be
excited.
Totally excited to meet this dude.
Yeah. It could even be somebody I actually care about, who I've known for years, who is like family. I love them. And what I just described, same thing.
But it kind of comes and goes because you and I have made plans, and I don't really remember you being late.
Wonderful.
You're like you're like you got lucky that day, or you've just been fortunate that I haven't been late. Because I mean,
It was a fluke.
I had I was in a situation that we've talked about a number of times, and for those of you that are just tapping in, this is a special edition of the Cops and Convicts podcast with Sean Shepard, and I have my close friend Brittany joining us today. We're talking about ADHD, and I was seeing somebody that I really, really, really cared about, and based on what I had told you, you were pretty sure she cared about me and liked me too. And when we made plans one day, the plan was for her to be here at a certain time, and then I was going to drive us someplace. And if she had come on time, I had a surprise in store for us. Let's just say she was supposed to be here at 2. She didn't show up until 3:30. I was pissed.
And that's valid. I can totally understand why.
And I felt like, okay, this girl doesn't respect me. She doesn't respect my time. And she's just going to waltz in here. And I'm not going to say something. So I'm like, is this how you get down? Is this, And she said to me, I'm working on my time management. And at that point, you're an adult. I'm just thinking to myself, what do you mean you're working on your time management? Either you want to be here with me. We made plans. Either you want to be here or not. And I described all of this to you. And I remember you saying to me, I don't think she's disrespecting you, Sean. I think she might have ADHD. And I'm like, nah, she ain't got no ADHD. You just sticking up for her because she's a woman and she's another black woman. You remember how I went off at you. I'm like, I was not wanting to hear that from you. Like making an excuse for her. And then as time went on, through instances I had with her, and then I flat out asked her, not if she had ADHD. I asked her if she was on the spectrum. And she said, I wouldn't be surprised if I am. And I was like, I got to call Brittany. And I'm just sharing that because here I am not knowing what the reason is for your behavior that seems completely disrespectful to me and my time and what I'm trying to do for you. Mm-hmm. And little do I know that she can't help it. Well, you do know. And I'm saying like for her to say I'm working on trying to be more punctual. If you don't tell me that you have this disability, I could very easily dismiss that and just be like, you're just making stuff up. I'm working on being on time too. Like, what does that mean? So how are we ever going to have a relationship? Are you going to be late for our flight? We're trying to take a train somewhere. You're going to be late for the train. And so I don't feel bad looking back, but I remember we had some other plans, still not knowing that she could potentially and most likely be on the spectrum, or at the very least have ADHD. We had plans to go somewhere that was going to require us, because I don't like being in traffic. I'm like, look, I want to be up here by this time. I don't really want to leave this early, but we need to leave this early so that we're not stuck in traffic. So I want you to be here at this particular time. And I said, and I don't mean an hour later. And so I actually gave her a time that was even earlier than I actually wanted to leave, to give her a buffer. And then I thought to myself, I don't know if I would want to do this long term. I don't want to lie to her to get her to be on time by saying, I need you to be here an hour earlier just so that you could be on time an hour later. You know what I mean? It just seemed like a lot to me. And I started thinking about that. But I would have had a different approach to it if I knew. And I understand that. I understand why you don't feel comfortable saying during a job interview or putting on an application that you have ADHD, because I can understand why you would feel like that's putting yourself behind the eight ball and giving you a much lesser chance of getting the job. Is
Yeah,
that
and I
is that accurate?
very much. Sometimes it feels like, and I mean this with no disrespect to people dealing with what they deal with, but sometimes it feels like being in a wheelchair no one can see. And I know I've heard people who live with disabilities how they have a hard time getting hired because employers don't actually want to accommodate them. And I could relate to that. Um, I take it. I've taken advantage of the fact that it's not visible um, to try to get ahead, but I didn't have the necessary um, habits to keep that job based on what they were asking. And so that's part of the reason why I didn't work well with them. Um, and so that's on me to have to continue to create better habits and strategies so that I can be there at the same time you want me to be there, and so that people don't feel disrespected. And at the same time, there are certain elements to this, like when employers, for example, complain about the pace of how I work, which I'm still trying to figure out how I would be able to fix that, because to me, that's not necessarily a punch in or punch out issue. That's you have a problem with the way I think issue. And I don't know how to fix that for you. And so, yes, there are medications out there to take that are supposed to help with my focus and all of that. But I'm focused when I'm working there. To like it, that I sort of mentioned earlier, to the point where I don't even like going to the bathroom. So for me, it's not an issue of focus at that point per se, but if it's still making me work more slowly than my peers, at least in those settings, I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate that. I don't have an answer for that other than where I had success, I had more flexibility on when I could work.
Let me show you a picture. Hang on.
That looks like me right now with my hair.
Okay, so when I Googled ADHD and I wanted an image for it,
Yeah.
that's one of the images that came up.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's literally me right now.
And I wanted to know what you thought of that image, whether that image is offensive to you or if that image is fairly accurate as it relates to what it's like living with ADHD.
No, I might want to make that my profile picture. I think that's great.
Really?
I think that's wonderful.
Why?
Very
Why?
accurate. It's just literally what's happening in my head. So I know this was something I shared with you in previous conversations, but also something with ADHD is that we have a problem with ordinance and the way things should be done in a certain order, because again, we're motivated by interest. And so that ties into how things are organized in our brains. There, if you walked in a room, it may appear to the untrained eye that it's like a messy room. Things are all over the place. And it's because And how I best describe it is my internal monologue is constantly talking. I'm constantly thinking about, even down to the most mundane tasks that I have to do. I have to think about them before I do them. Even if it's like, okay, I have to go brush my teeth. It's like, yeah, okay, it's time to go brush your teeth. Whereas I recently learned in neurotypical brains, certain routines are able to set in a certain area of your brain so that people don't think about doing those things. They just naturally get up and do them like a rhythm, like a dance. And that seems so foreign to me. I've never done something subconsciously while awake that had to do with like functioning in the world. So if it's getting ready, if it's getting dressed, if it's writing something down, I have to constantly think about the steps it takes to do that thing. It's like I have to find the pen. Where is the journal? Write down. Okay, what do I have to do today? When am I going to do it? What's most important? Okay, I have to go brush my teeth. I have to remember to do that before I leave. But I'm hungry. I need to make a smoothie. Or is there enough fruit in the freezer? Again, what am I going to wear when I run these errands? Where am I going to go? Like, it's like constantly all the time. Also, too, while that's happening, I'm also thinking about like quantum optics and the article I read that I thought was so interesting about a new element that they're going to use to perform in certain quantum computers. Or, oh my God, that meme on Instagram I just saw was so funny. Like, all that's playing at the same time, like all the time. So I have to be like, and when it gets more quiet is when I'm doing a specific task that I find incredibly interesting. Then it's like way more quiet. And I'm
let me ask you this. One of the most important books I've ever read in my life was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And what really hit me between the eyes was like the first paragraph or two talks about not being able to turn your brain off, and that the moment you wake up, your day is just one big run-on thought. You go from one thought to another, and there's no break. And I was like, that's me. I can't turn my brain off. And then I learned how to meditate. And I learned initially that if I would close my eyes and hum, that noise and that vibration in my head while I was humming, it made all thoughts go away. And then when I was done humming, the thoughts would come back. And I'm like, okay, I figured out how I could make things quiet, even though it's not technically quiet. It's quiet of words and thoughts. I just have this white noise in my head. And then I learned how to create the emptiness without the humming. And it didn't take me that long. I just focused on it. I experimented with things that worked for me. And now my life is so much clearer without all that noise, but it also puts me in a position where I'm now amongst people who have the noise in their head and I don't. And I feel completely isolated or just living on an island by myself because I have clarity and silence. And I'm dealing with a bunch of people who don't. And it sucks for me, not them. It sucks for
mutual.
So I'm bringing that up because I wondered if you've tried to, if you hum, does it get quiet for you? Have you tried that as a first step to quiet your mind?
So in general, yes, meditation is one of those natural solutions that I've been reading is especially important for people with ADHD. There was a time when I was practicing it a little bit, but I now realize I have to take it way more seriously because it's going to be essential for my continued success in the world.
Absolutely.
So that's something that I need to start to implement way more seriously in my life. And when I was doing it, even the little bit that I was, it was nice. It was nice, even though I still, when I would, especially in the beginning, when I was trying to get into the rhythm, my brain would be all over the place. But it was still nice to sit still. Or even when I would take Tai Chi as well. When I would do Tai Chi and I would force myself to slow down, it was nice. It calmed me down.
Yeah, you don't need medication necessarily. People always want to prescribe medication so they can get you to pay for it. But the book was talking about how most people are thinking about the future, which is anxiety, or thinking about the past, which is regret or sadness, and that we're not in the present. And my thoughts were, and that most of our thoughts tend to be negative. Mm-hmm. Where your brain your mind has controlled you. Your mind is controlling you, rather you controlling your mind. And so you have to navigate your way of thinking about those thoughts that all of us are thinking about, which is the future or the past, and then everything else about how you get through each day. So I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, okay, when I get up in the morning, I pee, I wash my face, I brush my teeth, I take my retainer out and put it in the whatever that ultrasound thing is that cleans them. I put eye drops in my eyes so that they're not red. I brush my hair, and I'm not thinking about these things. I just do them.
Yeah, that's foreign to me.
That's foreign to you.
Yeah, I have to think about everything.
And if you don't think about it, it won't get done.
Yeah, not always. It's not guaranteed. In fact, I'll forget because I'll be caught doing something else, and then I got dragon breath at 3 p.m. and I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to brush my teeth this morning.
It is a disability
in your world, yeah. Because I don't like to call it that too, because I feel like sometimes when you call something that's different a disability, it can put you at risk of ruminating in victimhood.
Okay.
So I don't want to necessarily call it that. I like to just say that our brains work differently, but because there's more of you, and I mean that in a general sense, than us, we have to adapt to your world. But there are certain careers and spaces where we thrive.
Yeah, like what I told you, creating your own business.
Exactly, right? Or the creative spaces, being a musician and artist. Like, there's still other ways of becoming successful. It's just we have to be a little more creative to do it, or take some extra steps to get there.
So I know that you've talked about what employers could do.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever thought about what politicians can do? I mean, they passed the American Disabilities Act a long time ago, but I understand why you say that ADHD doesn't really, like, they ain't really following that when it comes to that. Yeah. Especially if you're not telling anybody.
Right. And also, again, like I said, like I mentioned earlier, I just had a reality check on what accommodations actually means in the corporate world versus what it meant in academia. And, in school, it was, we will adjust to you. we will give you extra time. We will give you an isolated space. We will adapt the thesis prompt for this essay, you know, this and that and this and that. So I was used to people changing for me. And in my naivete, I thought as long as I could pull all-nighters or, you know, talk to someone in person, and if they could kind of get it, I was going to be okay. And that wasn't an effective method in the real world. Not everybody was open to it. Not everybody understood it or cared. And hence my struggles, because I didn't really develop, again, the habits I needed to better adapt to them, because that's how it is in the corporate world. They don't care if, you know, you needed extra time on a test. They need that report at 5 p.m. on Thursday because the customer is yelling at them because things are backed up anyway. And if you don't get that to them on their desk by 5, you're getting a pink slip or you're getting written up. Like, it's just not the same environment. And I had to learn that. It may sound obvious, but I was naive. And so I learned the hard way what that really looks like. And then it's like, I joke that for us, unemployment checks are the closest things we get to a disability check because we're constantly unemployed. I shared with you that I just recently learned, you know, we're 60% more likely to be fired at a job, and also 30% higher likelihood of having a chronic employment issue because we're constantly having to restart and look for work, and it wears you out having to constantly start over again. So.
And do you feel, unless you create your own business, if you continue to go the traditional path of applying for a job and getting it, you think that this is going to keep happening?
Mm-hmm. Unless again, you find that sweet spot of that alternative company that might have a younger and or more educated staff who are more open to varying shifts, like work shifts, and you know, how you spend your time doing what you do. And I think that's starting to come up in the workspace, but until that becomes the new norm, I either have to figure out how to do my own thing or, again, get lucky and find that niche department in some interesting company where the people are really cool and flexible. And I have come across that. It's just been more rare for me. But I have come across it. So that's why I'm working for myself. But until then, I have to continue to find that, again, that niche department with the cool people.
How are you going to be able to do any type of professional work where there's always going to be a deadline for something?
Oh, yeah. No, I still do my best to get it done. And it's going to be continuing to implement these natural solutions that we've talked about earlier, right? Taking them seriously for my health. Like, this is a lifelong thing I'm going to have to do. It's not like overnight. I'm working on some potential prospects with somebody who is familiar with my work. And if all goes well, he's willing to have me do some work for him. So that's going to be helpful. But you just take it day by day. And it's not to say that I've never gotten anything in on time. That's also not true. It's just depended on the project and the situation.
This has been a fascinating journey talking about your life and what you have to do on a daily basis just to get through each day. You know, I didn't really have an understanding of how you have to think about doing everything that you do or it's not going to get done. Thank you for being so transparent about not just your life, but the challenges. And I really hope whoever watches this really has a different perspective on what it's like for someone with ADHD to show up at your place of business and work. Are there any places that you want people to go to find you on social media or on LinkedIn, or not necessarily for a job, but like how can we find out more about you? I know you don't do a lot of social media because you probably don't remember to do it.
To set an alarm. I thank you, by the way. It's been such an honor for you to care and to listen. And by the way, to answer your politician question, I think we'd have to get them to care. We have to get some lobbyists, right? But for my social media, I'm not big on that, but should that change, I'll make sure that people will find me.
Well, if anybody wants to track down Brittany, you know where to find us. We're on YouTube at the Compton Convicts channel and my personal Facebook page, and on LinkedIn. And what's the other one? I always forget the other platform that we're on. I'm looking right at it. Well, I already said, and TikTok. Okay. So we're going live on TikTok right now. So thank you for joining me today and talking about this thing that we talk about all the time, but never really just like focused on it.
No, thank you for having me. And take care. I look forward to how you guys grow.
I appreciate that. And so for those of you that are following us, I am going to be live. I believe it's Tuesday, and you'll see this on our platforms. I'm going to be interviewing my former classmate, Georgetown University, Henry Baguia. And that conversation is going to be about him just coming out as a gay man in 2015. I had no idea. He was married, had a kid, and realized I'm living a life that is not me. And we'll be talking about what life has been like for him before he came out, during when he came out, and then after. So you won't want to miss that conversation. But Brittany, thank you for taking time this afternoon. I love you, and we'll have you back on at some point.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care.
All right. Hang on. I don't know why this isn't ending.
It's indicative of this episode.
Yeah, I'm trying to end the stream, but it won't end.